Good morning, Dad. And this is podcast 57. And it's going to be something that people deal a lot with when we're going to be learning about dealing with demons. A lot of people feel like that's unrelated to them. But we're going to notice some of the struggles and how Jesus can basically overcome all things, his supremacy. So I want to start with this question. Have you ever felt like your struggles are too powerful, your sins too great, or your situation too hopeless for God to redeem? I find that with a lot of people. A lot of people say they won't come to church or won't go to Jesus till they clean up their life, which is backwards. Today's episode will look into one of the most dramatic and powerful accounts of Jesus's authority and compassion. We'll see him confront an army of demons, restore a broken man, and leave behind a testimony that will transform an entire region. This is the story of Jesus restoring the demon-possessed man, and as we'll see from other accounts, two men. And it shows us that there is no darkness or struggle that Jesus cannot break through. So we will also look at some traits of demons and those they possess. And I think it's kind of interesting because we're surrounded by the spiritual warfare. So it's kind of, what are we looking for when we see, is it of God or is it of Satan?
Exactly.
So this is episode 57 in the Jesus Said That series, looking at every word Jesus spoke in the New Testament. Today's episode is titled Podcast 57, Jesus vs. Legion, From Torment to Testimony, from Matthew 8, Mark 5, and Luke 8.
I was thinking of a new title for a podcast. It could be the Older Brother and Brother podcast. And, actually, theologically, that would be accurate. But biologically, it's the Father and Son Pastoral podcast. So this is Pastor Kenny Burge Jr., the associate pastor at Tacoma Manor Bible Church, who has his hand in more things than anyone could ever imagine, from writing to music to podcasts to kids animated series. So it's diverse. I'm the simple guy in the process, the senior pastor, focusing on the teaching and more maybe perhaps the writing.
So it's good to be. Thank you for those kind words.
You're welcome.
And I'm really looking forward to this podcast today. The information is so good. So I say, because there's a lot of information and we try to keep to the point while still going through all the information. I don't want to have a podcast just cut stuff out.
Exactly.
So how we're going to approach this text, this is found in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, is that we will look at each account and then just get a little bit of different information from each account. Because some people do, the beginning, Matthew, Mark, Luke, then go to the second part of the account, Matthew, Mark, Luke. But I feel like you miss some of the writer's details. So
I agree.
This is still part of Jesus's long day.
I get tired just thinking about it.
So remember, it started with him healing the demonic man, which is kind of interesting. They say he has a demon. All those things happen, parables, so forth. Leaves the house, comes back to the house. And now he leaves again. Then he calms the storm. And that's where this story picks up, this narrative. So the disciples are still amazed by Jesus' power over nature. That's right. And he's coming to the Gerasenes, or the Gerasenes. It seems like from the different translations we talked about this, that one refers to the generic area while the other refers right to the city. So that's why the translation in your Bible might be a little different, but it's a Gentile region. So they encounter a man, or men, I have to make the point, that are demon-possessed, living in torment and isolation, and Jesus is going to deliver them. And this is a testimony that he's even powerful outside of Jerusalem, outside of Israel. I'm really looking forward to this. Now, I heard my phone beep, so I'm going to mute that real quick. I always should. There we go. It's live. Well, I'm excited also because we're getting a new camera at the church for security purposes. So if you hear the doorbell ring during this podcast, it's the Amazon man delivering one of our security cameras. So security is a good thing. So let's come over to Matthew 8, and I'm here. I also have all my Bible notes here. So it says in verse 28, this is Matthew 8:28, when he had come to the other side, to the region of the Gerasenes, 2 demon-possessed men met him as they came out of the tombs. They were so violent that no one could pass that way.
Yeah.
So it's kind of bizarre.
Yeah.
First of all, Jesus is passing by tombs, which seems like there's a purpose. Yeah. Why is he just randomly, after the super long day, walking by tombs? Yeah. There's a reason. Now, Matthew makes the note that these men were so violent no one could pass that way. Yeah. So I guess they weren't having funerals or burials or anything there. And unlike Mark and Luke, Matthew mentions the 2 demon-possessed men. And I think that brings the intensity of the passage. Not only is there one crazy guy, that's bad enough.
Right.
There's 2.
Yeah.
And I know that from dealing with crazy people. We've both dealt with crazy people from time to time, be it mental or spiritual. Yeah. And one's bad enough. When there's 2, it makes it much more dangerous. So here he is, and he's going to heal both of these guys.
And if I could just chime in for a second, so violent. I mean, that's quite a translation, so violent. The New King James says exceedingly fierce. The term only occurs twice in the Greek New Testament, here and in 2 Timothy 3:1. It means harsh, fierce, or savage. Let me give you the other reference, 2 Timothy 3:1. But know this, that in the last days, perilous, New King James, dangerous, if you will, King James, times will come. So when you look at the 2 references, you get the idea that the translators are trying to show you just how dangerous the situation is with these 2 guys.
And I would note that people should notice these traits.
Yes.
Because they're traits of the of demons.
Yeah, exactly.
So suddenly they shouted. Now, this is one of those text things. Is it the men shouting, or is it the demons shouting through them?
Exactly.
Obviously, we'll see in the text it's referring to the demons, but we don't know if the men are shouting this via the demon or if the voices are just coming. And they say, "What do you have to do with us, Son of God? Have you come here to torment us before the time?"
Yeah.
So this shows that they recognize Jesus, his divine authority, and also they fear their judgment. They know it's coming.
Yeah.
Before the time, I really think refers to the judgment at the end of the age, where they will be truly, it sounds cliche, but judged for all the evil they have done.
Exactly.
So they're like, please don't do that now. Yeah. So there was a comment, and this was interesting. I did some research, as I always say, but there was a common belief in ancient exorcisms that if you could name an individual, you could exercise power over them. So you would see that in the ancient writings, that they would try to always find the demon's name. And then if they believed, at least these Jewish exorcists in their writings, that if you knew the name, then you could exercise some control over it. So perhaps the demon is trying to intimidate Jesus. I don't know. Yeah. Maybe it's just saying, hey, we know who you are. Yeah. Or maybe still in their arrogance, even though they're bowing down, they say, you have no power. I don't know. It's hard to tell. But they know who Jesus is. And Jesus, shows he's superior because he just dismisses their words and then starts to tell them what to do.
Yeah. They're territorial, which I find interesting. Satan doesn't love to give up ground. He'll fight tenaciously. They were so violent and no one could pass that way. I think of Ephesians 4, be angry, do not sin. Do not let the sun get upon your wrath. But then it says, nor give place, topographies or English term, to the devil. These guys have staked out a claim among the dead, if you will, and they don't want to give it up. But who shows up but the Son of God? The Son that belongs to the category of God. It kind of answers the earlier question from Matthew 8:27. Remember, the disciples have the storm calmed, and they ask the question, who can this be that the wind and the sea obey him? He's the Son of God.
And that happened moments before.
Just before.
Maybe hours. So
we're getting a clarification on who he is. We can calm the storm. He can deal with these 2 possessed guys that no one seems to be able to shackle. They are something else. So we start to see who Jesus is.
And studying demonology, which is always an interesting word, study of demons, just from the Bible, I make reference to historical texts and stuff, but I'm not into any of this like modern exorcism, Catholic. I think that's a bunch of junk, and I wouldn't mess with it.
Yeah.
But when you study demonology, you know that these were angels before they fell, so they know Jesus. They would have served Jesus in heaven.
Yeah.
So there's some type of relationship here.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on.
Exactly.
And it says in verse 30, and I noticed this just the other day when I was saying this, it says a long way off from them. You always have the picture and the pigs are right next to them.
Exactly.
But Jesus and his disciples following the law wouldn't be close to pigs.
Right.
And it seems like these men came out from the tombs because they wouldn't walk through tombs either. So it seems like in the far distance, there's a large herd of pigs. In verse 31, if you drive us out, the demons begged him, send us into the herd of pigs. Go, he told them. So when they had come out, they entered the pigs, and the whole herd rushed down the steep bank into the sea and perished in the waters. So I think the pigs' destruction is a visualization. It's showing the true nature of demons.
Yeah.
And
I think that's so important. I'm sorry to cut you off there. First thing, I just love this because this is your original use of deviled ham, right? Okay, so I think that was very important to bring out there theologically. But traditionally, why do they want to go into the herd of swine? We've always been told because demons want to inhabit bodies, and in part, I believe that's true.
Could be true.
But more so is that what you were just referring to, their destructive nature. And it reminds me quickly of the story of the turtle, and it's going to go across the water, and the scorpion wants to ride, and the turtle goes, I don't give you because you're going to sting me. And the scorpion says, I'm not going to sting you. If I sting you, we both die. So he says, hop on. They get in the middle of the water, and it stings them. And as they're going down, the turtle says, why'd you do that? And he said, it's just my nature. This is their nature to destroy. And people have to understand the severity of Satan's plan is to ruin our lives and to kill us if possible.
And I think that's, as you're saying, it's the contrast between chaos of the demonic forces and Jesus's peace.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also his power. And we're going to, as we look through each of these passages, we'll give more details with each one.
Absolutely.
Because we don't want to give it all at the beginning.
Exactly.
So it's kind of like an illustration right here, a storm in a bottle. If you had such a thing, you open up the bottle, the storm comes out, but there's no storm inside the bottle. And that's kind of this man. His head was, or at least the men, I should say. I always say man, but men. But when the demons leave, they're kind of calm and clear and can focus.
Yeah.
Now, it goes on to say, then the men who tended them, speaking of the pigs, fled. Obviously, these men aren't in the graveyard.
Yeah.
As some pictures depict their distance.
Yeah.
They went into the city and reported everything, especially what had happened to those who were demon-possessed. Now, once again, this is happening in real time. There's no X, there's no Facebook or, news. So it seems like as the people come out, they start telling people start coming, and then as they see the man, these people are telling them reports, and it's all kind of happening really quick.
Yeah.
So it's not like they go into the city, report everything, then everybody comes and everyone has all information. It seems like it's a quick developing situation. So the herdsmen go in the city and start telling people. And these Gentiles, these people obviously knew Jesus was a Jewish man.
Yeah.
And the Jews viewed pigs as unclean. So perhaps they were afraid that Jesus was going to damage their bacon business when you think about it.
Yeah.
What if Jews could come in and they could just have magically all of your product, your pigs, just jump off a cliff? It would make the Jews happy and the Gentiles would lose their business. So there's a lot what's going on here. So go ahead.
No, I was going to say, it's actually almost like the report is those overseeing the stocks have just realized our portfolio is horrible, and they go to the stockholders and say, guess what? We're ruined financially. We're underwater. Absolutely.
At that, the whole town went out to meet Jesus. When they saw him, they begged him to leave their region. So they were overwhelmed by fear, I think.
Yes.
And I think, now this is my thoughts because I can't prove it, But I think they're motivated by greed.
Yeah.
And they just lost a lot of profits. And that's just one herd of pigs. There's probably many other herds of pigs.
Yeah.
And they don't want to lose any more business.
Yeah.
So they're scared of this Jewish guy. They said this Jewish guy has the power to, first of all, heal these guys.
Yeah.
And they probably knew it was demon-possessed or had issues. And cast them into the pigs. So they're like, okay, you need to get out of our town, please. Yeah. But I like how they kind of beg him because they're afraid of his power.
Yeah. I had marked down exactly what you just said. Materialistic hearts caring more for business than souls. And they should have been so ecstatic that these two guys that no one could tame are now they're going to be in their right mind. But no, it seems that they're more interested in their profits. And that's not good.
And Matthew's account is much shorter. So he leaves off a lot of information that Mark and Luke will give us.
Exactly.
So when we turn to Mark 5, I'll go ahead and turn there. My big lettered Bible. Highly recommend it. People sometimes ask, I use the CSB, Christian Standard Bible. It used to be the Holman. And I like how the translation, it's close to the New King James.
Oh, yeah. They've done an excellent job with the translation.
It just has some updated vocabulary, but all in all, I think it's good. So I would recommend it. Now, we come to Mark 5, and it says, they came to the other side of the sea, verse 1, to the region of the Gerasenes. Okay. So this is in the Decapolis, which is a Gentile region in the Greco-Roman culture.
Yeah.
And they had many pagan temples to their gods. And because they had all these temples, they would offer pigs as sacrifice. That was kind of a common thing. So as the Jewish people would tend sheep and then give them for sacrifices, these Gentile regions would also use pigs for sacrifices. Kind of interesting because, pigs are unclean, yet that's the very thing they use. Kind of the opposite of the Jewish faith.
Yeah.
So Jesus' presence and his action challenges both spiritual darkness and cultural norms in non-Jewish areas.
Yeah.
And then we get a depiction of these men. We get some more details, very harsh. As soon as he got out of the boat, Jesus, and in speaking, his disciples are there behind him. We assume that they get out of the boat. We know he gets out of the boat. A man with an unclean spirit came out of the tombs and met him. Now, I hear some illustrations real quick how, we need to meet Jesus. And it's interesting because Jesus, you're kind of wondering who's meeting who here. Because you wonder, why is Jesus, why in the world is he coming? And obviously he knows the future. So I think he's coming here to meet this man. But he didn't have to go in the tombs and seek him out. This man comes to him also, which is just kind of interesting. So he lived in the tombs. It's just focusing on the main individual here. And no one was able to restrain him anymore, not even with a chain, because he often had been bound with shackles and chains, but had torn the chains apart and smashed the shackles. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Notice more traits. Night and day among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always crying out and cutting himself with stones.
If I could just comment maybe on his strength, I recently just finished a chapter I was asked to write for a book, an anthology, and my life story. It's called Experiencing the Glory in the Story. And I was telling about your granddad, my dad, that was a police officer, that he chose perhaps to be shot at and survive rather than being in the coal mines like my two grandfathers, your two great-grandfathers, one of whom broke his back in the mine when it collapsed. And I'm thinking, there's my dad, your granddad, and he goes to arrest someone in Washington, D.C., puts the handcuffs on him, and the person goes, pop.
That'd be
you
scary.
Can't begin to imagine the fear that these people had who did try to shackle him. So it's a supernatural strength, and that's one of the characteristics, as well as the self-defacement, because there's no respect for the image of God, so he's marring that image. Yeah.
And that's part of our title, From Torment to Testimony. This is the torment.
Yeah.
So notice how he has self-harm. A very demonic thing is self-harm.
Yes.
Which seeks to destroy the image of God in humanity.
Yeah.
You wonder why there's always such gross violence in media. And it's always just like ripping apart human bodies. And I think, honestly, that's part of the demonic influence.
I agree.
That it's, let's take the very thing that represents God, which if you think about it is humanity.
That's right.
We're in his image, even if it's a fallen image.
That's right.
And if you hack and slash and beat and crush it, you're really just defaming, maybe blaspheming that image.
That's right.
So it's something we need to step back and think about with their violence.
Yeah.
Why do I get a kick, a joy, a high over seeing people getting destroyed?
Yeah.
Even if it's just entertainment. And why is that? Why is that entertainment? Because we see, in real life, self-harm is demonic.
And people don't go back to the Bible. In Genesis 6, God destroyed the earth because it says that the people were all violent. So why, if the Lord was so miffed at everybody's imagination or thought was wicked
It's
constantly,
their fault.
and there are violent people, and he goes, I'm going to have to wipe out the world's population, probably 1 billion people. Why can't we understand what the media is trying to do in our minds? And I'm sorry that people can't sometimes make the connection between the Bible and their entertainment.
Well, you think of just entertainment, it's sexual and violent.
That's right. Yeah, that's it.
The two things we see, because we're going to see this man was sexualized in a sense because he runs around naked.
Yeah.
Which we always see that with the demon possessed. They could care less about clothes.
Yeah.
Because what happens when we realize we have sin, we cover ourselves up.
Yeah.
So this is kind of, you're flaunting in God's face that I don't need that covering you made for Adam and Eve. So living among the tombs, I think this also shows that he's not part of the Jewish state.
Yes.
He's not part, or at least of the community that would, celebrate God.
Mm.
So I would like to encourage our listeners to put themselves in this poor man's shoes.
Yeah.
He's facing an army alone.
Yeah.
Maybe thousands of demons in this man. And he's waiting. He feels hopeless and he needs someone to come and deliver him. And that's going to be Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
So when he saw Jesus from a distance, so once again, here he is. He's in the tombs. Jesus gets off the boat. He sees him. He runs over to him.
Mm-hmm.
How did he know Jesus? I don't know. Was it the demons? Was it former experience? I don't know. But he ran and knelt before him, and he cried out with a loud voice, "What do you have to do with me, Jesus, the Son of the Most High God?" Yeah. That tells Jesus' identity.
Yeah, exactly.
"I beg you before God, don't torment me." For he told him, and it seems like when he first comes, Jesus says, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." Yeah. So it seems like that happens first. So the man bowing before Jesus is kind of ironic. Mm-hmm. He recognizes his authority, but he opposes him. So it's not like he's worshiping Jesus. He's scared to death. Yeah. It's kind of like a murderer before a judge. He's unrepentant, but he knows the judge has the power to take his life if he so chooses.
It's sort of the picture at the end time where every knee will bow and every tongue will confess. They're bowing the knee. They don't want to, but they're going to bow the knee and say, you are the Son of God, because he's the name that is designated that everybody will be judged by. Yeah.
And I honestly think that's what hell's going to be. A bunch of people who are still going to hate God.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't think it's like, oh, he was right. I wish I would have changed. I think a lot of people would be like, we still hate him for who he is. Mm-hmm. So they bow to him. Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" Mm-hmm. "My name is Legion," he answered him, "because we are many." Once again, I think that's kind of intimidation. We're many.
Yeah.
You're the Son of God, but we're many. And he begged him earnestly not to send them out of the region. And I kind of get the ideas with demonic activity. It's very unbalanced. Mm-hmm. On one hand, it's, there's many of us, we're strong. And then on the other hand, it's like, the reality is you could cast us into the abyss, so please don't do it. So
exactly.
I think demonic activity is, you're unbalanced, you're kind of off your feet, where with Christianity, you should be very peaceful.
Exactly.
You should be steady. Yeah. And he begged him earnestly not to send them out of the region. Once again, you pointed out, they're territorial. He wants to stay there. Mm-hmm. So the name Legion suggests many demons. And it's funny, when I look up a Roman legion, I get all these different numbers.
Yeah.
But it seems to be 5,000 to 6,000 soldiers, possibly. Yeah. This name may also invoke, kind of remind them of Roman rule, but I don't think that's the main point. The main point is that there's a lot of them. All right. And a large herd of pigs were there feeding on the hillside. The demons begged him, "Send us to the pigs so that we may enter them." Once again, this is tied to the Gentile economy.
That's right.
They would offer these pigs as sacrifices. It's a lot of money, a lot of revenue. So he gave them permission. Now, why did Jesus do that? We don't know. Is it that he's gracious?
Yeah.
I don't know. But he gives them permission, says, go there. And the unclean spirits came out and entered the pigs. Now, we're told that 2,000 rushed down the steep bank into the sea and drowned there.
Yeah.
I wish I would have looked up how much 2,000 pigs are worth nowadays, because I bet it's a lot of money.
I bet so.
So the death of 2,000 pigs highlight the multitude of the man's magnitude of the man's deliverance. So think about that. He had enough demons in him to kill 2,000 pigs.
Yeah.
So just the chaos in that poor man.
Yeah.
The men who tended them ran off and reported in town and the countryside. So that's interesting. Not only did they go into the town, but then as we were talking about the different translations, it looks like they go to the countryside.
Exactly.
And the people went to see what had happened.
Yeah.
So this is a sign, I think, to the Gentiles of the power of Jesus.
Exactly.
So they came to Jesus, and here's some new details, and saw the man who had been demon-possessed sitting there, dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. Yeah. So I'd be curious what happened to the second guy if he's sitting there too. Yeah. Well, we're not told about that second dude, so who knows what happened to him. The man who was once uncontrollable now sits calmly at Jesus' feet, and he's, restored. He's back to who he should have been. So this, I think, is a picture of Jesus' power to bring peace and order where there's chaos, craziness, demonic activity.
Our Christian lives are precious because he's not giving us a spirit of fear, but power, love, and a sound mind. So it's a great day when someone is rescued out of the kingdom of darkness, brought into the kingdom of light, had nothing but insanity and bedlam, and now has just total peace. And that's what the Lord does for us.
So those who had seen it described it to them, what had happened to the demon-possessed man, and told about the pigs. Then they began to beg him to leave their region. So I think this is also a clash of priorities. Losing a herd of pigs threatened their livelihood. Yeah. And also the restoration of this man challenged their worldview. Yeah. Well, if they're out worshiping all these Roman, who knows what other gods. Yeah. And then there's this guy here who is the Son of God. Are they going to switch their allegiance? Yeah. As he was getting into the boat, again, more new information, the man who had been demon-possessed begged him earnestly that he might remain with him. Jesus did not let him, but told him, "Go home to your own people and report to them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." So this man becomes a witness to the Gentiles, spreading the message of God's power and mercy.
Love it. Yeah.
And he knows who Jesus is. He knows he's the Son of God. Who knows what other information he had from those demons. So he begins to go and now spread the word. So he went out and began to proclaim in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and they were all amazed. I always wonder when the church started, or even later in Jesus' ministry, how many of these people were saved because of this man's testimony. Yeah. Before his healing, this man was feared, isolated, and uncontrollable. He lived outside of society, lived in the tombs. However, after Jesus' invitation, he becomes an intentional and commissioned missionary. Yeah. So, a lot going on there.
What a difference. I mean, before salvation, we don't have direction, purpose, meaning. We're probably somewhat destructive, if not just to self, but to others. And now in Christ, there is a mission given to go and make disciples.
So we're going to come to our final passage. Yeah. And we're also going to look at some traits of the demonic as we look at this. From Luke 8. Remember that snowstorm that was supposed to come that never came?
Exactly.
That my sermon was on spiritual warfare that I didn't get to preach. because we called it off because we were supposed to get in this big snowstorm.
Yeah.
And we have people commute in, we have elderly.
Yeah.
And that's the not fun part of leadership.
Absolutely.
Is making those calls.
Yeah.
So they were, what they were saying, like 8-9 inches. It was
Exactly.
And in DC, people go crazy with 2 inches.
Right.
So when they're saying that, it's like, okay, well, and I waited till you were out of town and I was in communication with you. And it was the night before. They still said big storms coming.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, we decided what we'd call it at like 6 or whatever that night. So we said, hey, let's call off church because this big snowstorm's coming. Keep everyone safe. And then we got like an inch. But so I wasn't able to preach that sermon with all that said, but we're going to see some traits here. So at least we get to glean from the sermon here.
Yeah.
So they sailed to the region of the Gerasenes, which is, this is Luke 8. I'm sorry. Which, starting verse 26, which is opposite Galilee. When he got out on land, a demon-possessed man from the town met him. Now that's an interesting.
Yeah.
So this tells us that he must have been originally from the town.
Right.
And then he got possessed, and then he lived in the tombs. For a long time, he had worn no clothes and did not stay in houses, but in the tombs. So here's a naked dude running around in the tombs. Very creepy.
Yes, absolutely.
So Luke is highlighting how this demonic forces affect this man. There's nakedness, isolation, you're dehumanized, and we heard from the others he would cut himself, just horrible stuff. When he saw Jesus, he cried out, fell down before him, and said in a loud voice, "What do you want to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, don't torment me." For he had commanded the unclean spirit to come out of the man. Many times it had seized him, and though he was guarded, bound by chains and shackles, he would snap the restraints and be driven by the demon into deserted places. So Luke gives us some more details that it's almost like this man is with it part of the time, and then the demons kind of take over and then do all this destructive stuff and then drive him into the deserted places.
Yeah, there's an idiom here. I've talked about it in past podcasts. What do you have to do with me? Literally, what to me and to you? When you trace this out a little further, it had two meanings. One was, what have I done to deserve this? For instance, the widow to Elijah in 1 Kings 17:18. Like, why did my son die? What do I have to do with this? And in number two, when someone was asked to get involved in a matter that they didn't believe they belonged in, as in John chapter 2 and verse 4, where Jesus says the same expression to Mary, who wanted him to do something to save a family that was about to be ashamed, maybe even sued at the wedding in Cana of Galilee. So you can tell there's two different realms here that's taken place. And their demons saying, what do you have to do with me? But I love it because they acknowledge that he's Jesus and he's the Son of the Most High God. And they know fully who he is. So there are two realms out there. We have to keep that in mind. One is demonic. It's organized. Ephesians 6, the principalities and powers. But then there's the realm of the most powerful. And that's why we have to abide in him so we can be fruitful. Because we don't have the strength to deal with these things in our own strength. We can't even see it.
Yeah. So we'll come over to what demons do to people. And we start with they inflict physical disorder and sickness. So first of all, we know a demon's a spirit, just like an angel. In a sense, not even close as powerful, but like the Holy Spirit. Yeah. The way I like to explain it, all of us are souls. That's the essence of who we are. We communicate via our body. That's why death isn't the end, because our soul simply leaves that communication, the way we communicate to other humans. But we're told by Jesus in various passages that a spirit can come into a man's soul and can cause trouble, or in the case of the Holy Spirit, can totally change the way you behave.
Exactly.
So there's a definite connection between consciousness with the soul and then a spirit.
Yeah.
So they can inflict physical disorder and sicknesses. Now, we're not saying all.
Exactly.
That's very bad teaching, because you can just have a physical ailment. But we see in Matthew 9, the man's a mute because of the demon. So in that case, it took away his speech. And then in Matthew 17, we see a man who was blind and had seizures because of the demon. So once again, they're destructive, they hurt, they try to cause damage. They can inflict mental and emotional disorder. So it gives a man a desire for violence and suicide. See that in Mark 5. It can give men superhuman strength in order to inflict damage to others, as we see in Luke 8. And it gives men the desire for gross immorality or nudity. And that's also Luke 8 in our passage. And just some observation, they desire violence. People possessed in Scripture cut themselves, mutilate themselves, attempt suicide, burn themselves, attack others, crave violence. So not the crowd you want to hang with.
Exactly.
They desire immorality, nudity. They often go around naked, because they're not in an innocent state and they understand God's standard and they go against it. They desire darkness. They can often be found around tombs and have a preoccupation with death and darkness. I kind of think of the whole goth vampire movement. That's really weird in society. And I think a lot of that is demonic origins. So we continue here. We can maybe do another podcast just on demonology one day.
Exactly.
But he says, "What is your name?" Jesus asked him. "Legion," he said, because many demons had entered him, and they begged him not to banish them to the abyss. So in Jewish literature, the abyss is the place of confinement for demonic spirits, and they're afraid that they're going to be sent there. And they recognize Jesus as the Son of the Most High God.
They know he can do it.
And then just to keep going through this, a large herd of pigs was there feeding on the hillside. The demons begged him to permit them to enter the pigs, and he gave them permission. The demons came out of the man and entered the pigs, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and drowned. And the pigs' destruction illustrates the contrast between Jesus' life-giving power and the demons' intent to destroy. It's kind of interesting. They just came from a demon. We believe, if you watch the last podcast, because Jesus rebuked the storm, that it was somewhat demonic. And these pigs go and then kill themselves. And the calm waters that were once somewhat demonic are influenced by that. So when the men who tended them saw what had happened, they ran off and reported it in town and in the countryside. The people went out to see what had happened. They came to Jesus and found the man the demons had departed from him, sitting at Jesus' feet, dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. So the man is in his right mind, and that shows that Jesus can heal both spiritual and physical brokenness if he so desires. So meanwhile, the eyewitnesses reported to them, so this happened at the same time, how the demon-possessed man was delivered. Then all the people of the Gerasenes region asked him to leave them because they were gripped by great fear. So getting in the boat, he returned. So they, once again, they're blind to spiritual truths and seem to care about their money. So the man from whom the demons had departed begged him earnestly to be with them, but he sent them away and said, "Go back to your home." Because we had learned earlier that he was from the town. And tell them all God has done for you. And he went off proclaiming throughout the town how much Jesus had done for him. And I think that's why we're saved, is the relationship, but also to share. And that's why the title of this is From Torment to Testimony.
That's right. Love
you
it.
go from, okay, I was abused, things were horrible, now I'm saved, so now I can go share the gospel.
Exactly.
He wasn't saved just so that he could go do yoga with a free mind or play baseball. You know, he's saved to witness.
Exactly.
Before we get to Timeless Truths, any thoughts there?
No. I believe people should really understand the details given. We both have shared accounts dealing with what we believe were demon oppressed or people. And the young girl I dealt with, she knew things sexually she shouldn't have known. She talked in a way that she shouldn't. So you got the immorality, you got the crassness, you get those kinds of things. You probably know there's a satanic influence. People should really take to heart these things, because as you're dealing with individuals, you want to know what depth of Satan could be there and just remembering also that he's the Son of God that can set him free.
And I always think of the story Jesus told, how basically the man who cleans himself, and it's morally, he sweeps his house, being his soul, everything's clean, then the demon will return and make it worse. So you can't not fill up your soul with anything. If you're just moral, you're open really to demonic influence.
Exactly.
All right, timeless truths. I have 4 of these that are very short. Jesus' authority is absolute. He has power over nature, demons, and death itself. That's what we learned from this passage, especially this entire chapter. Restoration is possible. No one is too broken for Jesus to heal and redeem.
That's right.
No one's beyond redemption. The power of testimony. Sharing your testimony can lead others to Christ, even in unlikely places. And the cost of rejection. The town people valued material possessions over spiritual transformation, missing the greater blessing of Jesus' presence.
That's right.
So those are timeless truths.
Yep.
And now let's look at our application or employment points, what we can apply from this passage. Bring your struggles to Jesus. No matter how overwhelming your situation may seem, Jesus has the power to bring freedom and restoration. That's important to know. You could be a Christian who's struggling. Jesus is more powerful than your addiction.
That's right.
Or you're unsaved, and he can save your soul. Value people over possessions. Let us never put material wealth over spiritual needs of others. That was these people's big mistake. Christians can do that too. And be a witness. Like the restored man, share your story of what Jesus has done for you. Some will be dramatic, some will not be dramatic, but also always share what Christ has done for you.
Yeah, we need to pursue Satan's captives and free them. We really do. You think about back with the storm, I think it was satanic. Jesus calms it, but there's a purpose. He's going to the other side because there are these 2 nude guys who keep cutting themselves who need Jesus. And so we have to pursue those captives. We have to kind of go get them. And that's why we go make disciples of all the nations. That the second thing that I found interesting is permit Satan's captives to reject Jesus. The truth is we bring the gospel. Everybody's got free will. You know, the 2 men are set free, and then seemingly the rest of the town, they don't want anything to do with Jesus. You can't help that. It's not that they were predestined to hell. It's in their free will. They go, we don't want this man. So sometimes you have to permit it and move on. And you find Jesus doing the same thing throughout the 4 Gospels.
But who knows if some of the town was converted then from the man's witness.
Exactly.
We don't know. Maybe that's why Jesus sent him back.
That's right.
So closing thought. Okay. This story reminds us that Jesus' power and compassion are limitless. Whether we are wrestling with inner battles or facing challenges, Jesus meets us where we are and offers complete transformation.
That's right.
So the question is, are you willing to let him work in your life? Are you ready to share the story of his goodness and power with others?
That's right.
And that was podcast 57 in the Jesus Said That series, titled Jesus vs. Legion, From Torment to Testimony, from Matthew 8, Mark 5, and Luke 8. Thank you so much for listening just to this part. And now I feel like that's, 40-some minutes. That's what we always shoot for.
Yeah.
So whether we have 8 pages of notes or 4. I'll share real quick before you share.
Please.
I just posted, or whatever you say, uploaded my next album.
Yeah.
So I'll attach one of the songs that I just uploaded at the end of this video, unless you're listening to the podcast. If you're on YouTube, you'll see the link for it. And it's on the Call to Ministry. Yeah. And I really like the song. Obviously, I wrote it, but so I'm biased. But I think it's a good song for anyone who's dealing with the call of ministry and what it involves. Everyone I let listen to it, it's not supposed to be a sad song, but they always cry. It was funny when you were telling me that you hadn't heard it yet.
Right.
And you heard it with the grandkids and you started to tear up. So I thought that was kind of funny, but I'll put the information below. But what has been going on with you? And
no, I appreciate that. Love your music. I think at times we just have a grateful spirit. Woke up this morning having my devotion. I looked over to YouTube, and there we broke the 50,000 mark of subscribers. It was 50,003. we never dreamed we would get this kind of support. I go back in my thinking to those original big gifts. We needed $10,000 to get started. Somebody handed us a check for $6,000, several for $1,000.
That's going many years ago.
And many years ago.
Equipment got a lot cheaper.
Exactly. But it's just the impact we have because we're both just trying to scatter seed. We recognize we're nothing more than messenger boys through music, through animation, through podcasts, through sermons, through books. But we're just always grateful for people's prayers because one thing I have connected with my poor folks around the world who don't have a lot materially, but they pray. And they pray for us. And I'm going, it's a partnership. We see what God is doing because people are sincerely praying that God would give us open doors, and he's doing that. So we're grateful for you and appreciate you much.
As always, share the podcast if you enjoy it. Just tell a coworker or friend, neighbor, whoever, hey, it's a podcast I listen to. You can find us on the podcast or through Apple, or most people I think do YouTube because it's easier format. It's just easier to access. But share. We always say like, comment, subscribe. So cliche, but it does help.
It does help.
And we like to hear from people. I meet people and I'm shocked because they're like, I really like your podcast. It's like, I didn't know you listened.
Exactly.
So, it's always kind of nice. It doesn't have to be anything profound. You can even say, I'm in so-and-so country and listening to this podcast.
Yeah, we would love to hear from
you. It doesn't have to be some deep theological question. It just sometimes it's encouraging to us just to know where you're listening from.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to next podcast because this is going to be an interesting one. Because I'm going to now put after Jesus crosses the water, Matthew, he's going to go to Matthew's house and have his feast.
Yeah.
Which the calling of Matthew was much earlier. And I'll explain why.
Exactly.
I think, if you don't put in this order, you're contradicting scripture. So that's a little tease for next episode.
Good hope.
I'm looking forward to it. And we'll see you next time.